Does he stand by his statement that the, quote, 100 years commemoration of Gallipoli, end quote, could be one argument for a joint ANZAC force to be deployed in the fight against ISIS?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I stand by my full statement on this issue, which reflects that the government has been talking to Australia about potentially partnering in a training role in Iraq. As I clearly stated when I gave a national security speech last month, the government will make a decision about whether to take that step on its merits, and there's a lot of work yet to be done on it. What badge someone might wear is very much a secondary issue to that.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Is he seriously saying that sending our troops to Iraq would be a fitting tribute to our fallen in Gallipoli, when the lesson of Gallipoli is not to sacrifice our troops in poorly justified military adventures?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What I am saying is that the government considers the Islamic State regime to be brutal, to be one that presents a domestic, regional and international risk to New Zealanders, and that the New Zealand government is considering a wide range of, or has considered a wide range of options available to stand up against ISIS, and one of those is providing a training force in Iraq.
Why use ANZAC?
Order. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Why did New Zealanders have to find out from the Australian media about the plans for our troops to be part of a joint combat force? Why didn't he just tell us?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, well, no decision has been made. What did happen was someone in one of the Australian newspapers ran a speculative piece. As I said at the time when I was asked about that, in principle it's a possibility, but it's a long way away from being a probability.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
When was a joint Iraq deployment with Australia first discussed?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I don't have that date to hand.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Given the Iraqi army's serious issues with ineffectiveness, corruption, sectarianism and human rights violations, despite over $25 billion worth of American support over the past 10 years, why is a token effort worth risking Kiwi lives?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the member may not take the build-up of ISIS seriously, and he may be so shallow in his thinking that he doesn't recognise the risk that it presents to New Zealanders, but I'd strongly suggest that he needs to school up a little bit more and understand how brutal these people are and the risks that they present to New Zealanders.
Why not try answering the question?
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
In light of his shifting statements and his failure to reveal the plans for an ANZAC unit until forced to, why should New Zealanders trust him when he says our troops wouldn't be involved in any combat?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
If anyone's making it up, it's Mr Little. There is no plan for an ANZAC force at this stage. There's been a very high-level discussion, and if ultimately it goes to that level, then we'll come back and talk to the New Zealand public about that. But I've been very clear in my speech I gave on national security that we were looking at a training unit in Iraq, that we looked at potentially doing that with Australia, and that we have deployed military people to scope that exercise out. If the member doesn't or can't keep up with my speeches, he's just learned to read a bit faster.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Why can't he simply front up and be straight with New Zealanders about his plans for deployment of troops to Iraq?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the member needs to learn a new line, otherwise it'll all get a bit boring in the next 3 years.
Order. If the Prime Minister could just address the question that's been asked.
Speaker,
Order.
When the member learns to read, he'll learn how to keep up. That was all in the speech of a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Defence and asks, has the government given instructions to the Defence Force to begin preparations for deployment to the Middle East, and if so, when were those instructions first given?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, the New Zealand Defence Force has up to 50 personnel stationed in the Sinai on a peacekeeping mission. I understand those instructions were issued in 1972. Mr Speaker, we also have around about We have about 30 people stationed at Al Minhad Air Base in support of the P3 Orion activity there. Those instructions were reissued around about the 2nd of November of this year and publicly notified on the 3rd of November. Mr Speaker, I've no doubt that some preparation for rotation of those personnel and others who are stationed throughout the Middle East may well be happening. But the member will note that on the 5th of November, in a speech on national security, the Prime Minister said that the possibility of the New Zealand Defence Force being involved in capacity building or partnership building with with Australians in Iraq would be investigated by defence personnel. A number are doing that at the present time, but I would state very, very firmly there has been no decision to deploy into Iraq on any mission at this point.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, was the Prime Minister correct in stating on Monday in regards to military preparations for a potential deployment to the Middle East that, quote, "I'm told planning remains at a very early stage," unquote?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Yes, it is correct. We've had no formal reports back from the officers who are looking at the building partner capacity mission that could take place in Iraq. And, Mr Speaker, as for suggestions that there are other preparations taking place, I'd simply point out to the member that he would know from his own experience that all armies train for deployment should it be required.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, was it him that told the Prime Minister that preparations were at a, quote, very early stage? And if not, was he aware of the information that the Prime Minister was given that planning for a potential deployment of the Army to Iraq was underway?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, there are always discussions between the Prime Minister and his ministers about any range of matters that the ministers may be dealing with, and this would be no different. The deployment you're talking about concerns the up to 10 military personnel who have been involved in assessing what opportunity New Zealand may avail itself of in building partner capacity in Iraq, but no report has been received formally in that regard.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, would he describe the preparations currently being undertaken by the Army as pre-deployment contingency training? If not, why not?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
As I said earlier, Mr Speaker, all armies throughout the world, by very definition of their mission, train to be deployed. As I also said, we have up to 100 military personnel at any one time deployed across a number of bases in the Middle East. So, of course, there will be some preparations for what will be required in those missions, but there has been no decision to deploy into any new mission in the Middle East.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, which one of these statements is correct? The statement made by the Prime Minister on Tuesday said, quote, "No decisions have actually been made by the government yet, except for the ones in relation to humanitarian aid, and no decisions have been made by Cabinet," end of quote, or his statements on Wednesday, which said, quote, "Cabinet determined on Monday of this week a decision that we would engage in the fight against the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria," which is correct.
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, the first two are certainly correct. The last one is completely incorrect. And most certainly the member, well, I think the member would have a lot of trouble finding that particular quote. I did not say that. What I said is that Cabinet made a decision to allow some officers of the New Zealand Defence Force to engage in a discussion with coalition partners about the possibility of building partner capacity in Iraq. No formal report has been received from those people. No decision has been made about that possibility.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Ron Mark.
Mr Speaker, I raise this point of order in attempt to assist the Minister for the next lot of questions that might come. But I seek leave of the House to table the Hansard where that Minister made exactly that quote.
Order. Hansards are freely available to members. I take this opportunity... Order! Take this opportunity of reminding members the point of seeking leave to table a document. It's to provide information that's not readily available to members of this House. It's certainly not an opportunity to make a political point. Does the member have further supplementary?
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister. Is he aware of the extent of the preparations being made by the Army for deployment to Iraq? If not, why not?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, no, because we have made no decision to engage in such a deployment, nor has any instruction been issued.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister. So is he telling New Zealand that he has not given any instructions for the New Zealand Defence Force to deploy to Iraq, that he has not decided what role they should perform when they get there, that deployment dates have not been given to soldiers or their families, and that pre-deployment contingency training being conducted in Wairau at this very minute was not authorised by him?
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, to clear up a couple of points. Firstly, no instructions have been issued to the military to prepare for a deployment in Iraq. We have indicated that should it be suitable, should it be appropriate, that after the Gallipoli celebrations next year, the frigate may deploy to the Indian Ocean, and we have also extended the P3 mission out of Al Minhad Air Base. Those have been publicly stated by us. They are not missions into Iraq, and no instructions have been issued to the military relating to deployment in Iraq beyond the investigation of a partnership building capacity possibility.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister. Which of the following is true? A, that he and his government have given approval for a deployment of the Army to Iraq, or B, there is a rogue Army officer with a rogue unit conducting their own preparations and training right now in Wairau?
Order, order. Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr Speaker, none of the above. I suggest that the member who would claim, I think, to have some inside information from the Army might recognise that perhaps some of his contacts are a bit too long in the tooth to be reliable.